today's news, when it comes to protecting homes against wildfire threats, California's building codes are a national model. But only a tiny fraction of homes in the areas threatened by this week's fires were built after those standards were enacted, according to a media analysis of state data. The state first mandated fire-related building requirements in the wake of a devastating 1991 fire in Oakland, which killed 25 people. Those mandates were significantly beefed up in 2008, when the state approved a new building code that applies in designated fire-prone areas, which include most of Pacific Palisades and some but not all of Altadena. The codes require ignition-resistant roofs, fire-resistant siding, and exterior windows and doors that can resist fire for at least 20 minutes, among other features. California has some of the strongest wildfire building codes in North America, said Judson Boomhower, a University of California San Diego professor who studied the requirements. It's quite clear when you look at the post-incident data that those codes really have had quite an effect. In parts of California subject to the fire-related building codes, a home built in 2008 or later was about 40% less likely to be destroyed than a home built in 1990 that had identical exposure to wildfire, according to a 2021 study Boomhower co-authored. But the rules only apply to new structures built after the updated code was approved, and don't require property owners to retrofit older buildings unless they're in the midst of a major renovation of their home. The vast majority of the homes threatened by the LA area fires this week were built before the codes went into effect. According to CAL FIRE incident reports, only about 5% of the structures in the area surrounding the Palisades fire were built in 2010 or later, and 16% were built in 1990 or later. Less than 3% of the structures in the area around the Eden fire were built in 2010 or later, and about 9% were built in 1990 or later. One of the big challenges about wildfire resilience and vulnerability is we have this enormous stock of really old houses, Boomhower said. That means we have this legacy of decisions made decades ago about where to build and how safely to build, and that has a big effect on our experience of wildfires today. Fire-related building standards are especially important because, unlike a flood or hurricane, how quickly a wildfire reaches a home depends on whether it first consumes neighboring houses. That means that even older homes built before the modern building codes were passed are better protected if they're in a neighborhood with more newer homes. Local authorities have previously acknowledged the risk of fire to aging homes. A Los Angeles County report issued in 2021 noted how a high percentage of homes in areas vulnerable to wildfire damage were built before the adoption of building codes with higher safety standards. Even as the flames are still burning across the Los Angeles area, residents and local leaders in the region are starting to think about how to rebuild their devastated neighborhoods. While damage wrought by the inferno may have been unavoidable, the reconstruction process should be shaped by efforts to minimize the risk of future fires, experts say. Regions vulnerable to wildfires can take steps to better prepare, such as changing neighborhood designs and enacting policies that require residents to clear brush and debris, said Daniel Aldrich, a Northeastern University professor who focuses on disaster resiliency and recovery. Those are things we can control right now, Aldrich said. Some of the most effective interventions, however, would be costly or disruptive. The state or local governments could do more to incentivize property owners to retrofit older buildings. California started a pilot program to do that a few years ago. Still, it would be highly expensive to retrofit all older buildings in fire-prone areas, even though that would make them significantly safer, Boomhower said. It's not yet known what sparked this week's blazes, but several of California's previous biggest fires have been started by falling power lines that ignite surrounding trees or brush. Some utility companies in the state are already moving to bury power lines in fire-prone areas, although the process can cost millions of dollars per mile. The one thing they could have done 100 years ago is bury the power lines under the street. They can still do that, but it is very expensive and would disrupt a lot of communities. Water lines could also be upgraded to handle increased demand in the event of a drastic fire and better guarantee pressure to fire hydrants. There are absolutely actions we can take, said Eric Porce, director of the California Institute for Water Resources at the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources. We can make investments in larger distribution lines to maintain pressure or help to refill those storage tanks faster. Still, some experts question whether the most fire-risky neighborhoods, those on the border between cities and wildland, should be rebuilt at all. Researchers have suggested policies to incentivize some survivors of fires to move to less dangerous areas, in a strategy known as managed retreat. We have to think about more and more places not rebuilding, said UCLA's Pierce, who acknowledged the difficulty of suggesting some people should move on from their long-standing homes. But given the risks, he said, that's, I think, where things are headed.